Jai Sairam. Welcome, Steve. So I understand that you've known Swami for decades. Can you tell us about the first time you heard of Sai Baba and maybe the first time you went to see him?
Yeah, I was kind of a mixed up teenager. My mother would go to this retreat in Lakemont, Georgia, and the man's name was Roy Davis. You may be familiar with him.
Roy Eugene Davis.
Roy Eugene Davis. And she happened to see a film that Roy was showing about Sai Baba. It was Aura of Divinity. And she came back from that film and she was very inspired. The things that she saw in the film about him materializing objects and statements that he made. And so I caught a little bit of that. I thought, wow, what is this? And so I went to the retreat the next day, and Roy Davis was showing a slideshow on his recent trip to India. And so I saw that, oh, that's interesting. And then I kind of just filed it away. But there were just a couple of books that were acquired about Sai Baba. One was Man of Miracles by Murfitt, and Holy Man the Psychiatrist by Samwise. So I read those two books and I read some teachings. And I guess one thing led to another, and I just got really inspired. I think I also read the Bhagavad Gita. It became almost like a burning desire. I just needed to see him. So when I was 21 years old, I sort of set out on my own and sort of startled my parents. My mother got very concerned. She prayed to God, well, if you're Sai Baba, if you're who you say you are, if you're God, if you're an avatar, would you help my son every step of the way? That was the prayer. And so she had a dream. She said it was like a vivid floor where Sai Baba was walking on the floor. And it's like Sai Baba would walk, take a step here, take a step there, as if Sai Baba was with me every step of the way. I thought that was a reassuring thing for her. And also what happened, the really profound experience after 3 months, I never got a chance to talk to Sai Baba that first trip. But he walked up to me, and of course, as I said, I was a mixed up teenager. I really had no direction. Had constant emotional feelings and that sort of thing. So I was going through a rough time emotionally. And so at the end of that trip, Sai Baba walked up to me and looked at me for like a half a minute or a minute and just sort of stared at me. And his facial expression changed to something very serious, something I'd never seen before, and then he just sort of walked on. And so I think what that kind of said to me was whatever I was feeling, he knew, at least he knew about it. At the time, I was just totally blown away. I was just beside myself, and that's all I could really think about.
A lot of the devotees that are very close to Swami, that have had everything from him.
Yeah.
That they've had Padamaskar, they've had him make Vibhuti, they've had interviews, they've had everything, all these experiences. They say the most valuable thing is for him to just stare and sit there and look at you and stare at you for some time.
Wow.
Because he can do so much work on you when he does that. And
Yeah.
he is doing so much work on you because he's taking his time and focusing on you, probably your past, your present, and your future.
Right.
And
right.
And doing things in that
And
way.
when I got back from that trip, I really thought, I really felt better, and gradually I started to improve emotionally, and the spiritual connection got better. So that was the effect. I just feel very fortunate and very lucky because if I had not done that, I think I would still perhaps be lost. I don't know. I really do feel like my life got changed significantly and forever.
So you were saying this was going to set up a second trip, so can you tell us anything about that trip?
Yeah, so the second trip, my parents somehow got interested in going with me. I don't really remember all the details, but we went to Christmas in Whitefield, 1985. So it was a good introduction to Sai Baba for them. And my mother, she prayed to Sai Baba. She said, if Sai Baba, if you are who you are, I want to look into your eyes. That was her prayer. And so first thing, Sai Baba walks up to her, looks into her eyes, and she immediately became essentially a devotee, I think, at that point, because she saw love. That was her story. She saw the love, or divine love, that Sai Baba had. My father was a little bit slower on the spiritual path. He had doubts and questions. So as I guess we all do. But eventually, later on in his life, he did become a solid devotee. Just took a little bit longer.
Lovely.
Several years later, we went with a group from San Francisco. I joined with them, and so we were able to get an interview on that trip, and I was very fortunate to be in the interview for the first time. And I was just sitting right in front of Baba, and what I remember, a couple things I remember from that interview was he materialized 4 things sort of right in a row. And the most dramatic one is he materialized a lingam, a big, large rock, and I was just looking right at him, and just sort of fell out of his hand. And there's this big rock, the biggest thing I've ever seen him materialize.
Wow.
And there was a ring for a man with a heart condition. There was a necklace for an Indian boy. And he also materialized a silver bracelet. And then he's like sort of, like as if it were for me.
Wow.
And he it's like, okay, he's going to give it to me. So I reached out my hand, and he just put it on my hand like this. So I had this silver, it was a silver, I'm not wearing it at the moment because I loaned it to a friend.
Wow.
But it's a silver bracelet with Om on it. And I wore it for about 30 years. But the significance of that, after wearing it for so many years, I realized, wow, Sai Baba gave me my mantra. It just sort of occurred to me one day. And so I started chanting Om. And that has made, I think that's the biggest difference. That bracelet was, I think, my mantra, and that's the most significant thing from that.
So, if you had to put it in a few words, Steve, how has Sai Baba changed your life?
Totally, completely. I think the path that I was on as a teenager, before finding Sai Baba, I think I would have been, let's say, more confused and more in doubt and whatnot. The side path, if you will, helped me tremendously, and I think it continues today.
Who is Sai Baba?
I think of Sai Baba more as a best friend right in nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's sort of evolved into that because God is your best friend. I mean, we have other people that we know, that associates or family members, but I try to give all my problems and difficulties to God, and it seems to work because I actually do get some direction and guidance pretty often.
One of the amazing things about Swami is that he has this somewhat magical, mystical, omniscient, omnipresent relationship with so many people, millions probably.
Yeah. God is your best friend. Eternally.
Well, we certainly consider you a friend of ours, Steve, and Sai family, and we greatly appreciate you taking a few minutes just to share with us some of your journey with Swami.
Thank you. Thank you, Sai
Sai namo namah, Buddha Sai namo namah, Yehovah Sai namo namah, Sarva Swarup